so the question is, and the fact of the matter is, not even the question, I think the fact of the matter is, we hold innovation and productivity uh, to, we hold it up as something, um, as a type of inherent right. And I think it's sort of gone beyond untouchable. It's a mandate. It's a mandatory. It's a must for contemporary society, modern life, for there to be this, not just the machinery, but the this constant, again, coming back to this theory of growth, this constant growth. That is the underlying root of contemporary life. And and it's something that we protect. It's something that we sort of, you know, rally around, right? It's a type of rallying cry for the modern age, right? Innovation. And I love innovation. This isn't, again, I'm not, you know, don't start in with the whole fucking, you're radical leftist. No, I'm not. I'm saying this is just, I'm just observations. Now, the only thing that we really have to mitigate that reality, and this is a reality, is, I mean, I guess legislation, but I don't think that we actually I mean, the degree to which we legislate productivity is probably competition. So, which is to say, you'll have lobbyists and monopolies who petition the government to legislate laws that make it harder for competition to be enacted. So you'll get a lot of sort of obstructionist laws being enacted. So that to that degree, you might have obstruction happening. Okay, you know, so we've seen that. And I mean, I don't know what to say about that, but that happens. The other thing is this propaganda? Is this way of shifting the focus off of the necessary conversations, the harder conversations, the more complicated conversations in and around concepts, and practices, and, you know, refining, retooling, or re-envisioning things like the system, like democracy and or capitalism, and or productivity onto itself, and shifting the blame and turning it into some kind of us versus them narrative, right? And yes, in this piece is absolutely right. The us versus them isn't always black and white. Like I say, like a lot of times today when crazy things happen, and people are like wondering, well, who's to blame? You know, the convenient boogeyman is China. It's usually, you know, why are there no jobs? It's China. Why, why is the internet not safe? It's China. Like it's this very reliable go-to mechanism that I mean, I grew up with it, right? This is this, you know, I'm not talking out of turn. This is something we've all seen, we've all experienced. And if you, and it's funny too, it's interesting he makes the point about knowing history. If you don't know history, this sounds all very plausible. Like it all sounds like something that you would seriously consider, like, oh well, maybe there is this threat, especially if you're not particularly worldly, if you're not very just informed with respect to the complexity of politics, and particularly where history is concerned. So this would sound very plausible. It does sound really reasonable. I mean, there's got to be an enemy, right? And they're not just going to pluck an enemy out of thin air, right? There's got to be a reason why they do this. But at the end, when you take a look at um, politics through this historical lens, and it's sort of, he does a really interesting job. I think, again, very quickly in 23 minutes he covers quite a bit and really just sort of points to these things and says, you know, this is a recurring pattern. You know, this is a recurring pattern. And when you look at it through that lens, you see that it's a convenient way of, again, redirection, use of language, use of culture as a dividing mechanism as opposed to a unifying one, or a dividing mechanism as opposed to one that's focused on resolution, right? And really interesting piece that sort of fits in with this larger narrative, this larger theme of research and exploration in and around well, I don't know if it's so much around politics. I think around economy. To me, I think it's always, this is an issue. I think a lot of the issues we face um, have to do with the economy, essentially, and or um, the more rudimentary systems that we have in place. So yes, the economy, or another way of thinking of that is capitalism as a mechanism that sort of fuels the economy, and or democracy as a mechanism that facilitates capitalism. All of these things being to some degree an extension of the other. And how effective is it? And do we look at it with enough uh, uh, honesty, uh, you know, intention in such a way, you know, as to be able to see it for what it is? Or do we all fall victim to uh, the propaganda, which is that we will do anything not to look at the system and try to find any other thing that we can lay blame to? Like, it's not the system, it's not the system, it's that guy. It's not the system, it's not the system, it's those people, you know? And so that we and I mean we, all of us, um, are implicit in the dysfunction of our systems, particularly because this is a democracy, particularly because we all do. I mean, it's funny because, I mean, in as much as I believe that democracy is about everybody sort of taking part and participating, um, the way we operate democracy is largely an investment in abdication of your own personal responsibility. So, in a way, it's a weird runaround where we talk about being in a democracy and we talk about how great a democracy is, but the way we practice democracy has a lot to do with giving up your responsibilities and letting somebody else take the reins, which sort of flies in the face, I think, of what the principles of democracy actually stand on. So it's weird, but that's sort of how we practice it. And because we do that, we're sort of allowed, it's a type of plausible deniability that's built into the system. So we're allowed to be ignorant, and we're allowed um, to pretend that we don't, or not even, I don't even think it's a pretense a lot of the time. I think people genuinely don't see the strings. They genuinely don't see the strings. And so the propaganda works, you know? And so you can legislate all of these policies, all of these statutes that actually work against the population, right? Because they don't know any better, right? Because part of the way the system functions is that you abdicate your seat at the table. You need not know what is going on. What you need to do is just trust that the leaders who you've handed the reins over to do know what's going on, and that you can trust them. And hopefully you can, but that's sort of a toss up because you really don't know who they are, right? You're handed a bunch of names. You don't know these people you don't know these people. But you assume that, okay, we have this sort of um blanket trust, right? It's a type of blind trust that we as citizens have for um, everything, for our companies, for our governments, for our institutions, for our authorities. A type of blind trust, right? And I guess society needs that in order to function, right? But uh, then you don't know when you're being duped, right? You don't know when you're being lied to. You don't know when the wool is being pulled over your eyes. You don't know your environment, right? And so as it changes and as the landscape shifts under your feet, you're caught unawares. The whole paradigm is changing before your eyes, but you're being told to look over there. Look over there. It's that guy over there, right? But it's the system, right? It's the system, and it's not the system because some guy is twisting his mustache and he's just an evil sob. I don't really buy it like that. I feel like it's machinery, and it's machinery that grows and advances, and it it kind of operates on its own. It has no master, right? Or it has a master to the extent that we've written into its programming how it should function and what it should prioritize, and that's generally the machinery that we exist inside of. So it's indifferent insofar as a given a particular person's needs or wants or concerns. It's indifferent about these things because it is machinery, right? So so we're oftentimes caught unawares. We're oftentimes sort of, you wake up one day and you're like, what the hell? Right? How did this happen? How did we get here? What do you mean I don't have a job? What do you mean I can't afford it? This is not what I was promised, right? I was told that if I do the work, I was told if I do this, I was told if I do that, this is what's going to happen, right? But nobody can be told that because nobody knows what's going to happen, right? Because we don't have a system that's built like that. It's not like that. It's machinery, and the machinery is indifferent. Not evil necessarily, but indifferent. And I think that until we have the wherewithal to see it for what it is, and to see how these things are interrelated, and to see the complexities of the thing, the complexities of the thing, and the nuance of the thing, and the strings that we are all tied to, then we will be forever puppeted by this thing, is how I see it. And I think this is a really interesting piece. I mean, I feel like it's one of those pieces that like triggered like 6 different things in my mind, and I was like, I don't know where to start. But it was very relevant to all of it, right? And again, sort of speaking to how all of this complex machinery works together, and the fact that we are not that aware of it. We're just not. We're just not that aware. Like we're just, and again, I don't think that this speaks to a lack of character, right? So much as it is, it's incremental. Like this is the thing that I think most people miss in the conversation, in the hysteria, in the panic sphere that is sort of modern day analysis, is that I don't think that it's I don't think that the maliciousness is intentional. I think that it's incremental, meaning that it's a series of events that onto themselves seem incidental, onto themselves seem innocuous, but cumulatively become machinery that is indifferent to human suffering. And so nobody really knows how to talk about it, because we've gone through this process of indoctrination, we've gone through the process of abdication, we've gone through the process of deception to such a degree that we don't, again, we don't understand our environment. We don't know how our environment works. We don't understand it. We don't know how to talk about it. We don't understand it, right? We live inside of a system we cannot comprehend. I think that, and that is proving to be difficult to manage. I don't think impossible, but the fact is people have to get right with it. In this lecture, he talks about the necessity for understanding history and historical context, so that we understand why does China get brought up every time something miscellaneous happens that seems to border on dangerous or criminal, and but we don't really know why, because it has historical context, it has historical relevance, it helps, it's misdirection, right, in the political landscape. It's helpful to know that, right? And me, everybody, we're trained to, because of this system of blind trust, we're trained to simply believe it. Even if you are a suspicious person, on some level, you kind of figure, well, they're not just going to lie to you. Right? Or if they are lying, they must have a good reason for it, right? I think we give a lot of passes to authority because on some level, we do understand how complicated it can get, right? And we understand we're not at the table. I'm not at the table. I don't know what those conversations are. I'm sure that these are human beings who have our best interest at heart. On some level, we're all creating these passes and saying, okay, even those of us who are critical and do offer analysis and are insightful, on some level, you're banking on the hope that the people at the top, the people at the table, the people who are making these decisions really do have our best interest at heart. Because otherwise, none of this works. Not only does it not work, it doesn't have the hope of working. because that's really all that our system is. It's a series of blind trusts, right? Now, there is the potential of what the system is and the reality of what the system is. I believe that this idea, the system of blind trust, this abdication, this process of willful, um, you know, um, just willful blindness, right, is has been incrementally, uh, uh, you know, manifested, right? And I think that the process of dismantling that has to do with the conversations, has to do with this idea of being able to contextualize through historical understanding, um, and has to do with being able to sort of uh, uh, trust that the people, not, I don't want to use the word trust. I feel like democracies, as we move through this period of adjustment and this period of democratization of communications, particularly because communications is such a powerful device that, and as it becomes accessible to more and more and more sort of everyday people, that system um, requires uh, a type of process of training, process of education, process of becoming informed, right? Um, and that is, I think, a good one. I think that's necessary, right? But I think also what's part of that process is so as you learn, and I think become an advocate for learning, as you become informed and become an advocate for being informed, and you become one of these people who uh, um, helps to spread the word, as it were, um, and hopefully that helps to correct the ship, right? It hopefully helps to create an informed electorate, right? Citizenry that understands how these how this machinery works on them, and how to think about the machinery and how to approach the machinery, right? How to detach from the machinery in a way that is constructive, right? So you can disassociate from the machinery so that you understand that it's separate. It's separate from you, and it's also separate from the people who work within it, right? Um, these are spokes, right? There's spokes and cogs, right? That operate within the machinery, right? So it's not about that guy or that girl or that person. It's a system, and it's a series of systems, right? It's machinery, right? And the better I think we get with that understanding, we can understand how important it becomes for us all to take more responsibility for that machinery, so as to help to correct it, right? So that this edifice that is democracy becomes uh, actively involved in the maintenance of the machinery, as opposed to this passive process of abdicating the responsibility and looking away from the machinery and trying to find other reasons, as to why things aren't working. But if we don't care about it, then the fact of the matter is the machinery runs away without us. We don't find a way to understand it, to participate, to take responsibility for it. The machinery runs away without us. And yeah, I think part of that understanding has to do with being able to look through the historical lens, and how language and culture, again, are used against us. And language and culture, some of my favorite things here, to be honest. Love language, love culture, but it is a double edged sword. It is a double edged sword. And if we're not careful, we are completely puppeted by these things and turned into fools and turned into enemies and turned into mindless, you know, uh, uh, mindless creatures, fighting over scraps, right?